Hi guys, this week we are covering the second part of the Byzantine Empire. We're going to look and see why they fall apart. Last week we looked at how they developed and made them so great, but they too fall apart, so we have to figure out why. If you need to, go review last week's PowerPoint if you don't remember some of those details, but we'll just give a brief background here. So remember that the Byzantine Empire forms when Rome falls apart. So we end up getting the Western Roman Empire and then the Eastern Roman Empire, and we rename the Eastern Roman Empire the Byzantine Empire. So it means the same thing. It's like somebody being named Michael but going by Mike. They're still the same person. Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire are the same thing. The first really great emperor of the Byzantines was Justinian I, and he made it his mission to recreate like the glory of old Rome. He wants his empire to be just as big and spectacular as Rome had been for many hundreds of years. So he works to recreate Roman laws and recreate Roman artwork and recreate the size of ancient Rome. So he sets out to reconquer some of those lands, and this is the exact same map from last week as well. So you can go ahead and take a look at that on your own. So one of the first real problems that happens in the Byzantine Empire is about religion. Remember that the Byzantines are Christian. They became a Christian, or the Romans became Christian under the first Christian emperor, Constantine. Remember, Constantine was also the one who decided to move the capital to Constantinople. At the same time, he declares that all Romans should be Christian. And that works out for a couple hundred years. But in the time since Constantine, when he moved the capital in the 300s, there were some arguments that started to happen within the Christian church. Church leaders disagreed on a couple different topics, like who should be in charge of the church. Some felt that the emperor should be in charge of the church, and some felt that the religious teachers, like the priests, should be in charge. They also disagreed on where that religious capital should be. They were wondering, should it be with the capital, the government capital in Constantinople, or should it be in Rome, where the church had first begun? And they also disagreed on which language they should use to worship, because originally they were worshiping in the Latin language, but most of the Byzantines did not speak Latin anymore. They spoke Greek. So there's a couple other topics that they disagreed on, but those were the big ones. And these disagreements got to be so heated, in fact, that in the year 1054, they actually split the Christian church into two. So Great Schism means permanent split. They end up creating two Christian churches, or two Christian religions. One is called the Eastern Orthodox Church. One is called the Roman Catholic Church. And both of these religions are still around today. And before I go any further, I just want to remind you guys, we have talked about religion before this year, and I am in no way, shape, or form preaching to you. I'm not telling you what religion you should be. We are not doing like religious studies here. We are looking at how the history of these religions has impacted the history of the world. So, it is something, it is a great historical event. It does change the path of human history, so that's why we're taking a look here. But again, both of these churches are still around today. If you live in the United States and if you say that you are Catholic, you're most likely Roman Catholic. And once these churches split into two, they are free to kind of make their own decisions for themselves. So the Eastern Orthodox Church decides that the emperor of the Byzantine Empire will be their religious leader and that their religious capital will be the city of Constantinople. And the Roman Catholic Church decides that the Pope will be their religious leader and their capital will be located in Rome. So some of these things might sound familiar to you again if you are Catholics. The Pope is still in charge of the Catholic Church, still lives in Rome, technically Vatican City, but that's in Rome still. So this slide just shows some of the specific differences between the two churches. As they existed back in the 11th century, so in 1054 when they first split. Obviously there's some other differences today, but you can see that like the Roman Catholic Church decided that they wanted to have their services done in Latin, whereas the Eastern Orthodox Church says, nope, you can either speak Greek or whatever is the local language. They decided who's going to be in charge. They decided some other kind of details about the religious teachers, but they do have a lot that's similar. They still base their religion on Jesus and the Bible. They still do a lot of the same religious ceremonies. They just have kind of a different outlook on life. But again, both of these religions still exist today. So you can take a look at this map. It'll show you where the two religions were most popular. So that Eastern Orthodox Church is in the blue areas. So in areas that we would now call like Eastern Europe and parts of the Middle East and parts of Turkey. Those are their modern names, would be the Eastern Orthodox Church. The orange areas are that Roman Catholic Church. That's most of Europe, most of Western Europe. So this is what the map looked like in 1054. Obviously looks a little different today. And then this is just a real quick kind of tree to show how Christianity splits up. So when the Christian religion is first invented, there is only the one that's at top level. But then in 1054, with this great schism, we break it up into two, Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox. Later on, that Roman Catholic Church is going to split again to Roman Catholic or Protestant, and that's going to happen in the 1500s, and that is something you're going to cover when you get to world history in high school. So that's really beyond the scope of what our class does, but you will get to that later. Some of you might know some of that history already if you are any of those religions. So let's talk about the decline of the Byzantines. So Justinian was their greatest emperor. He did a lot of good stuff for them, but he ends up dying in the year 565. The emperors that come after him are able to hold on to their power and their greatness for a while afterward, but the downfall of the Byzantines starts at about the year 600, and it's not something that happens fast. It takes about 600 more years for the Byzantines to really fall apart. So it's a very long, gradual process. Starting in the year 600, the Byzantines are under almost constant warfare. Either they are starting the wars, going out trying to conquer more lands, or enemies are attacking them. So they're almost always fighting, which causes high taxes. If you remember back to Rome, high taxes are a bad thing. They are almost constantly under attack from enemies like the Slavs, who are coming from areas that we now call like Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, so Eastern Europe, and they're being under attack from the Persians, who are coming from the area we now call the Middle East. And in our next week, we're going to talk about the development of Muslim empires and the Islamic religion. And so the Byzantine Empire is also under almost constant attack from Islamic empires coming from what we now call the Middle East, the Arabian Peninsula. So they're starting to lose territory to these Islamic empires. They lose territory in northern Africa. They lose territory in the Middle East, like they lose out on what we now call Syria and Jerusalem. And then they also have a series of religious wars called the Crusades that were started by Christian kingdoms in Europe to try and regain control of the Holy Land from those Muslim empires. So this map here shows the 4 different crusades that happen. So each of the lines with the different colors, a different crusade. If you take a look at the map, all the crusade routes go through Constantinople. All of the religious soldiers fighting to regain control of Jerusalem make like a pit stop in Constantinople. So even though the Byzantine Empire did not start any of these wars, the wars kind of happened in their empire. So they kind of got dragged into it whether they wanted to or not. And you are also going to cover the Crusades in a lot more detail in high school. So just kind of know that they were a thing that happened, and the Crusades are one of the reasons why the Byzantines declined, because those Crusades brought almost constant warfare to their empire. So the empire eventually falls apart starting in the year 1204. On the 4th Crusade, Christian soldiers from Western Europe actually invaded and conquered the city of Constantinople. Byzantine armies were able to regain control of the city, but once they were invaded once, it became so much easier for other enemies to do the same. So again, we have that constant attack from foreign enemies, and internal conflict eventually weakens the Byzantine Empire, and the Byzantine Empire permanently falls apart and is completely conquered in the year 1453 by a new group of people called the Ottomans. So they were like the brand new empire that was really on the rise. The Ottoman leader, they don't use the word emperor, they use the word sultan, but Sultan Mehmed II conquers the city of Constantinople and renames it Istanbul, and that's the name that it continues to have today. So the Ottoman Empire is what we now call Turkey. So Sultan Mehmed II transforms Constantinople and what was a Byzantine Empire into a great Muslim empire and a great capital of learning, trade, and religion. So the reason why we talk about the Byzantines is they did leave us a lot of really good items that basically have changed world history. The Byzantine Empire was able to save or preserve the Greek and Roman traditions. So much of our ancient writing and so much of the ancient world that we know about today is because of the Byzantines. They were the ones who saved those artifacts that let us know what happened back in the BCE times before the year 0. So they save things like the Greek language. We are able to read ancient Greek today because of the Byzantines. They were able to save much of the libraries of these ancient texts. They are the ones who preserved Justinian's code of laws that a lot of modern laws are based off of. And the people who fled the city of Constantinople when it finally fell to the Ottomans, they brought all these artifacts and all these treasures with them when they went and escaped to Western Europe. They went to live in Rome and in Paris and in other Western European capitals. And they basically start a time period called the Renaissance that you're going to spend a lot of time in high school studying. But it's basically this looking at the ancient world and becoming interested in old teachings. So basically this whole class that you have been learning about this year in 7th grade social studies happens because of these Byzantine scholars who are able to save basically all of the knowledge of the ancient world. So next week we are going to look at those Ottomans and those Islamic empires that rise and cause the fall of the Byzantines, and then we will keep going into more modern history.